Hi guys, I'm Melissa.
And I'm Isabella.
And today we are going to teach you how to make
Sinigang.
Stay tuned. So here are the ingredients that you'll need for pork sinigang. We have
Pork belly, which was $7.38.
it's not bad.
And we got pork soup bone.
So that's bone-in pork made for soups.
And this was $3.93 US.
Okay, and then what you also need is a sharp knife, a cutting board, tamarind soup mix. We got garlic and onions or shallots, whatever you have. One big daikon. This is about the size of my, over the size of my forearm. We've got eggplant. The Asian market only had this Chinese eggplant, and they're extremely large, but for this recipe, it only really calls for one to two medium-sized eggplants. We also have Roma tomatoes. You can vary with this as well. You can do anywhere from 1 to 3. And then lastly, you could use regular leaf spinach, but we prefer choy. It's spelled O-M and then C-H-O-Y. This was $5.83. So all in all these ingredients plus what we had in the pantry to feed the family for pork sinigang, it's roughly under $30. Stay tuned for the rest of the recipe. All right, so biggest tip is to always do your vegetables first to prevent cross-contamination. First, the daikon. You need to peel it and then cut it horizontally this way about, let's see, we'll do about this thickness. I'm not sure what that is, but the thinner it is, it's easier to soak up the soup juice, so it's more flavorful. You don't want to chop it too thick. For eggplant, it's quite different because eggplant will get soggy. You want to make a thicker cut. So after you wash the eggplant, you cut off the ends. And for the eggplant, you want to make it about 1 inch. So this thickness, so it doesn't become soggy. For the tomatoes, after you cut or wash this, you just cut it in quarters, like so. And then for the choy, this needs to be rinsed also, but everything on here can be used in the soup. Just like asparagus, you cut off the ends. So here you just need to cut off about 2 inches at the bottom, and then everything else is used for the soup, which is a lot of veggies. So now I would cut it into like 2 to 3 inch wide pieces after washing it. Next, you will need some garlic and onions. For the garlic, you can chop up 1 to 4 cloves of garlic. And for the onions, you can use either white, yellow onions, whichever your preference is, or here is what we had available, which were shallots. This is what the daikon looks like after it's been completely chopped up. Just remember to rinse the vegetable as well as peel the entire thing and then chop accordingly. This is how the chopped tomato and chopped eggplant looks like after it's been cut up. The tomatoes, once again, are chopped in quarters, and the eggplants are cut into 1 inch slice pieces. Pictured here is the choy. After cutting them into smaller slices, you can cut them at any size you wish. For this photograph, we sliced them about 3 inches long. Here is the final outcome after chopping all the vegetables. We have the eggplant, tomatoes, choy, garlic, onions, and daikon ready to go. After cutting up your vegetables, you can move on to the pork. Here we chopped up our pork meat by cutting them in about 1 inch long pieces. After your meat has been fully chopped up, you can move them over to start searing on the stove. Here we have a griddle on our stove, which is very convenient to sear the meat. But if you don't have a griddle plate such as this, you can easily do the same searing method within a pot or a frying pan. After you heat up your pot, add about a tablespoon of oil into the hot pot. There you go, that's good. Turn it down to medium. Add in the onions and garlic and stir fry gently until golden brown. For sinigang, you can use any onions that you can find at the market or in your pantry. Just for this instance, we used the shallots that we already had on hand in our pantry. You also want to try to find fish sauce. This recipe doesn't call for much, but this is what we had in our fridge. When you are creating the soup base, you want to make sure you have the fish sauce on hand to add to your soup broth. Now that you have your vegetables and your meat chopped up, it's now time to create your soup base. After your garlic and onions have turned golden brown, it's time to add in your chopped tomatoes. As the heat renders down the tomatoes, the juices, the seeds, and the tomatoes just wear down, and then it will start to create a base. It'll thicken the tomatoes down to somewhat like a paste. If you are short on time or want to speed along the cooking process, you can smush the tomatoes as it cooks, and that way it'll speed along the process for you. Whenever you are done searing your meat on all sides, as well as creating the soup base, which is the tomato, garlic, and onion mixture, it is now time to combine the ingredients. Here you'll see that I'm using a set of tongs to remove the meat from the griddle and into the large pot. By doing so and mixing it together, you're allowing the flavors of the soup base to really get into the meat. So as you're eating this soup, you can taste all the flavors when you take a bite of the meat. Now, after you've completed adding the meat into the soup base, it's time to add water to your broth. Now, depending on how much meat you have, you want to make sure you add water accordingly. For us, for a family of 5, I probably added about anywhere from 5 to 6 cups of water. It really depends on how many mouths you are trying to feed. The big rule of thumb is to add water as you go. To start, you want to have the water be above the level of the meat. Now, this is the biggest ingredient in which makes sinigang so flavorful and so sour. It's what's called tamarind soup mix. This is a packet of ingredient that you can find at most Asian supermarkets. Depending on your taste profile, you can add very little or the whole packet or even 2 packets, really. For us, because our soup, sinigang, lasts us for about 2 days because we use so much meat and so many vegetables, we tend to use at least 2 full packets. Now here are the final steps. This is when you add all your vegetables. The reason why you want to add the vegetables toward the end is because the vegetables tend to wilt and get soggy. So the best time to add in all the vegetables is when your meat has been cooking in the soup broth for at least 30 minutes or so. That way you can ensure that the meat has been fully cooked. Now here is the final product of your pork sinigang soup. So congratulations on making this recipe. This is one of our family favorites, and we definitely eat this at least once to 2 times a month, if you could believe that. But this is what it would normally look like, depending your preference on how much water you want in your actual soup. But again, we use the daikon, choy, and eggplant as our vegetable preferences. Now, you want to make sure that you let this simmer at a low heat once the vegetables are cooked. That way it doesn't overcook and you don't need to constantly add in more water due to evaporation. But a good rule of thumb is to allow this to simmer for about an hour. I recommend more than that if you have that time and if you're prepping that much in advance before lunchtime or dinner, whenever you plan to eat the soup. If you want to increase the speed of cooking time, you can transfer the meat into an Instant Pot so that way the pork can tenderize even more. So we'll see you next time. Thank you for watching. Bye-bye.